Hi, my name is Major Lori Rehfeldt, and I was stationed at RAF Bentwaters. I was 18 years old when I got there. I was an airman basic, and it just completely changed the way I see life because it was just a crazy base, crazy time to be there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm still trying to understand actually what happened during that time frame.
Mm,
And so, but my book,
mm,
actually, it's kind of a memoir,
mhm,
UFO book,
mm.
but the reason I included a lot, going through my childhood, it was sort of at that time, women were not in the military, or hardly.
No.
So, I would figure that one of the questions people would ask is, how did you end up in the military? Uh, I grew up, my mom and dad were divorced, so that really changed the income. We were a middle class family until they divorced.
Mm,
So I tried to explain a lot of things. Also, I'm like highly intuitive. I usually make decisions based on my gut versus,
mm,
looking at
mm,
all the facts. If I try and be logical, I usually screw myself up.
mm.
So I really I trust my gut, my intuition, and whatnot, my sense of feeling,
Mm.
kind of thing. So,
That's
and
good.
that comes into play during my time there.
Mm,
Um, we had a growing up. I had there was this evil presence in our cellar, and my mom would have me go down in the cellar to get some cans and that kind of thing, and I'd be like terrified because I knew that there was something evil down there.
oh, okay.
And then later on, when I was a teenager, my mom and dad divorced. I stayed with my dad, and my other siblings went with my mom,
Mm,
and they I was sitting in, we called it the stone room, and I'm sitting in the stone room, and all of a sudden I can hear from the basement, ha 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 ha. Ha. And
great.
I had a babysitting job, and I left the house immediately and ran to my babysitting job.
Wow.
Uh, it scared the hell out of me. And, I just felt, it was just something that I knew, but it was as if it was laughing at the fact that of the demise of my family. And so it was just like a lot of crazy, things like that. Also, as a child,
Mm,
I went to a Catholic school, and I had seen, I thought it was a big statue, a beautiful statue of Mary, the mother of Jesus.
mm.
Um, and when I went past these double doors, she was up on a pedestal covered with thousands of flowers,
Wow.
and um, the coloring was vibrant. It was just completely beautiful. All the other statues in this church were beige,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
it's unusual. Then when I went past the next set of double doors, because I was in line, we kind of had to march into school, and you didn't stop.
Mhm,
If you had nuns watching you walk, and you're like, no, you get back in line.
mhm.
So they prepared me for the military. And so when I passed the second set of doors, it was gone. And my so I was just trying to figure out how could they have moved that statue
Right.
that far, and where did they move it to? So I spent most of the day trying to figure that out. I
Mm.
was in second grade, so I'm just a little kid, but
Yeah.
uh, so I went home, and my mom asked me, "How was your day?" And I told her, and I said, "Yeah, it was good. I saw, the statue of Mary, the mother of Jesus, and my mom immediately got on the phone. My grandma is living in Ireland. My grandma is Irish.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
so my mom is making a transatlantic call to my grandma. I got to tell you something. Lori has seen the Mary, the mother of Jesus, and it's in the story, and it was really a wonderful way of how my grandmother framed it, that it was a gift,
Mm,
that what I saw, it was a form of like intention, or It was just something that, not everybody has that gift to be able to see what others can't see. So
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, so this followed me, this was just part of who I was. And when I went into the Air Force, I just really didn't have anything.
Mm,
At the time, let me see, at the time, the economy, there was a big recession going on in the States, and there weren't many jobs. And I couldn't see myself working, in a store and just kind of, and I didn't have a car. I mean, it was like a logistical nightmare.
mm,
Oh, I figured the Air Force would fix that. And I kind of looked over my shoulder and said, well, Vietnam War is over.
yeah.
Because I grew up in an area, we had no military bases. So I was kind of very naive, very naive of what to expect,
Mm,
basic training. And
mm,
but it was I ended up going to Lackland, and this was January of um, January 23rd, 1978.
right.
And for some reason, I enjoyed it. I don't know, maybe because they had a lot of food, and, they gave me clothing and they paid me money, and, that kind of thing. And then I went to basic training down there because that's where the law enforcement and the security police trained. So I stayed an extra 5 weeks. And it was then I got my orders to Bentwaters.
Right. Okay.
And I was so excited because I put down England on what we called a dream sheet.
Yeah. Excellent.
So I'm like, I'm going to England. I felt like I won, a free vacation, So I get to England. As soon as I get there, I get off the bus,
Mm,
and I could feel this heaviness on me.
right.
Something's pushing down on me.
Mm,
And the first thing I see my sponsor,
mm.
which was nice that she showed up, and her husband. And first thing she said was, "Welcome to Cripple Creek."
Ooh.
And oh no.
Is it?
I mean, to me, it was like I got to get back on that bus, go back to either Laken Heath or Mildenhall because the
Yeah.
base is more modern than Bentwaters. Bentwaters, it was all Quonset huts. I mean, it was just there was really nothing to do. I mean, I think that's why a lot of guys were drinking a
Right.
lot because
Sure. Yeah.
that was entertaining.
How to talk about. So, do you think that you've had these experiences growing up, and a lot of people have them kicked out of them by society and life, but you stayed in tune to this other side of reality, the other side of life, so that when you went to Bentwaters, you were kind of tuning into what was there.
Yeah, well, it was tuning into me. It
Right. Okay.
was Yeah, which is but the thing is that at the time, I wasn't even thinking about it. I just felt, I felt like there was a heavy weight on me, but I didn't feel and I felt there was just something wrong with the atmosphere. I felt that, but
Mm,
I didn't say it to anybody because I was scared. I didn't know how people would react.
mm,
So
mm.
I tried my best to be logical, like I said, it was, and to be like a lot of the guys to say, okay, I see each tree in the forest versus, oh, I got a good feeling about these trees. It looks really nice. So,
Yeah.
it was just that way. So I was like one of five women in the 81st Security Police Squadron
Okay.
of there was roughly about 300
Mhm.
airmen in it, and so I was definitely, an anomaly.
Mm,
It didn't take long for me to realize that my personality did not fit law enforcement, and but the other thing is that I worked when I was in basic training. They put me on the gate for about not no, it was in technical school. They put me on a gate and I waved cars onto the base for about an hour.
mm,
And after that, I said, okay, well, that's done. Let's do something else. And
mm.
then when I get to Bentwaters, I end up that's my main job is to be an entry controller. And it was like mind numbing. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was. Yeah.
it was just really, really difficult. But there were more difficult things going on because
Mm.
we had some areas on the base that were just really completely um, scary that things were going on.
Wow. Like what, for instance?
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, well, anytime I was stationed at East Gate is at RAF Woodbridge.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
pretty much a hot spot where things happen.
Mm.
And we're told that when we get there, oh, Suffolk County is the most haunted county in the world, and
Mm.
all that stuff. And we're all about, so when you get on East Gate and you're working a midnight shift,
Sure.
like you're in the back of a metro van
Mm.
and with a bunch of guys, and you got your alert bag, and the first stop is to drop me off at East Gate.
Mm.
And I get out, and it's just a little telephone book, a
Mm.
telephone booth
Yeah.
size. And so I get off, and then the Metroban leaves, and I could see it go up. It's a perimeter road, but you could see it go up the crest, and then
Mm.
it goes down a slight hill, and it disappears, which I knew it would, but
Mm.
something told me I really wanted that connection of being with other people because it was scary, and so
Mm.
you sit in the gate shack and and you knew that no cars were going to come through. I mean, it took about a year or so when they finally decided to shut down East Gate
Mm.
for the midnight shift.
Mm.
So, there at that East Gate, now over time, I had these experiences where, I felt the presence of something, and one of them was there. It was about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was a gray. And
Okay.
he was at East Gate right behind me, and he said to me, "Don't look back." It was kind of like, "I know you're scared, don't look back." And
Okay.
I was tired. I was really, really tired. I was fighting to keep awake, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm not looking back. I just don't need to be scared. I'm
Mm.
not looking back." So I kept looking forward, but I could feel it behind me, and it was like a flash in my mind of what this gray looked like. He was short, because his head reached the bottom part of the window that was behind me.
Mm.
And so he was on the side by the forest, the Rendlesham forest
Mm.
part.
Well.
So that happened, and I just knew, it's like the writing on the wall says,
Mm.
you better not talk about this, Lori,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
else they're gonna put you in the loony bin.
Mm.
And then the second one was it was over on Bentwaters. It was at the Ivy Lodge Gate area. There was this we when you're on patrol, you had to go to this locks, liquid oxygen, and check the lock.
Mhm. Mhm.
The locks is
Mhm.
you know.
Mm.
So I went over there, and you had to get out of the vehicle because the supervisor would sometimes put a note behind the lock to make sure that you getting out of your vehicle and checking it. And I just felt like off base. There was a fence to my left, and I felt that directly off base. It was something. It was like this kind of like a crazy like a swamp man or something, and just scared the heck out of me.
Mm.
And I knew, and this is the other thing, so I knew that there must have been a pond back there because that's where he was
Mm.
staying. But the thing is that the pond,
Mm.
you couldn't see it from outside the gate. You had to go through a lot of like foliage and trees and shrubs, and it was just completely overgrown at the time. It wasn't until I looked at Google Earth
Mm.
and found out, yeah, yeah, there's a pond there,
Mhm.
and and just knowing that really kind of freaked me out even more that I would know these things that technically I really shouldn't know.
Mm.
But so those were two things. So anytime I went by that locks,
Mm.
I, I mean, it would scare the hell out of me every time. I would feel like his face was pressing against the door window, and because we were driving American cars at that time too,
Mm.
American trucks. So you know, the wheel was on the left side. And so I put the car in reverse and go bat out of hell to get the hell out of there. I was like,
Right.
yeah, I you know, didn't care. But of course,
Mm.
you know, I didn't tell anybody about it either.
No. I mean, so what do you think? Is there something about this place? Is there a,
But
why this place?
I think there's several. It's like a mix of several things. There were a lot of experiments going on in that area, not that far off base.
Oh yeah.
And my feeling is that they were playing around with Einstein's theory of relativity, and I think they punched a hole in a dimension. So it was
Wow.
kind of like a dimensional, because none of this stuff I experienced, and this includes, I'll get to the UFO part in a little
Mm.
bit.
Sure.
Um, this it's like it would fade. It was kind of, it wasn't like something would fly in and land and do all this stuff. It was almost like it was moving in and out of
Right.
like one realm or dimension into another. So that's the way I view it. I don't think you really see any crafts from another uh, planet, another galaxy coming to
Yeah.
our galaxy, like going past Jupiter to Mars, and
Mhm.
no, they move through dimensions and realms.
That makes sense to me because I know there was a lot of secret advanced technology going on around there, Marshall Heath
Yeah.
and all those places.
Yeah, Bobsy Bay. And
Yeah, yeah. Do you think though it was like joint, the US and the UK doing it together, or
did I think what now?
was it the UK doing it with the US military? Were they all involved together, or?
No, no, we were definitely an American base. I mean, we uh yeah, I think the Air Force had rented out the bases from the UK.
Yeah, yeah.
We did have one person who was from the British side,
Hmm.
but I never really saw him, but I heard about him.
No,
And
I'm just thinking, I'm just talking about the tests that whatever's created this, was this created by the US or the UK or together? That's what I'm trying to get at.
oh oh
Yeah.
I think it was a mixed bag. I think there were some experiments that they were doing over. I'm trying to think of the name of the place. It was when had something to do with Tesla, and when they were trying to use like radio waves. They were working on
Mm.
trying to figure out a way of making things
There was the
disappear.
yeah, there was the over the top kind of radar thing, wasn't there? They were working on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And it just seemed that there was like a lot more behind the scenes.
mm,
Um, with the Cobra Mist, although talking to Simon Holland, he had mentioned that was almost like a front for something else. It was kind of like
mm,
look over there instead of over
sure.
here. But I thought that was interesting to realize that I was around. I was so close to a lot of these things that
Absolutely, yeah.
definitely affected me and affected quite a few airmen. I mean, we had a high attrition rate of
Mm,
airmen being thrown out because they would have a fight or flight feeling like I
sure.
gotta get out of here. I got,
Yeah,
and in
sure.
my case, I was pretty much just I gotta stay low. I gotta low crawl my way out of here and go to my next base.
Yeah,
I just
okay.
felt like this wasn't the Air Force. Wasn't what I experienced at Lackland, and it wasn't what I experienced when I got to Lowry Air Force Base or Nellis Air Force Base, or even my final assignment on active duty was actually Fort Belvoir, even though I was in the Air Force.
Mm,
And they were all they were what I would expect.
Mm.
But but Bentwaters it was really a nightmare. I mean, it wasn't and it really changed me a lot too. I mean, I lost my stamina. I had put on weight, and it was my mom came to visit, and she didn't even recognize me. I mean, it was just really, really. And as soon as I left there, I was like everything went back to normal. I just
Yeah, that's good because I know obviously people like Jim Penniston and John Burroughs have experienced kind of long-term health issues after
mhm.
this mission there. So
Okay.
so it's good that you
Well,
have, but
yeah. Well, with me, I mean, it's still with me. I
mm,
mean. It's not, it was something that I wanted to run away from, to leave my experience there.
yeah,
It wasn't a good experience. Then when I got to my second base, I went up to um, Sergeant Campos,
mm,
and he had been at Bentwaters the same
mm,
time I was there, and
mm,
he got there at Lowry about a month or so before me, and I went up to him and I asked him um, because he was a kind of now a little bit of a higher ranking
mm,
non-commissioned officer. And I had asked him, I said, what did you think of Bentwaters?
mm.
And he had this really kind of weird smile on his face, as if to say, you don't want to go there. You don't want to go there. And I'm thinking, why? You know,
Yeah,
why, we saw a lot of crazy stuff. We experienced so much craziness, we had a guy that had he was a tech sergeant, I believe, who was living in the dormitories. So he had a good career. He had about 12 years in the Air Force, and all of a sudden one day he decides to go and break into the sound center, which was a store we had that had all the stereo equipment,
right.
and, and he stockpiled it in his room. And but when they caught him, he had a harpoon as his weapon of choice. And
So
I'm thinking, I'm staring at the harpoon when it was at the desk, at the law enforcement desk, thinking, what the hell is going on here? I mean,
yeah.
this is just like crazy. And why would somebody who was successful to get up to the rank of tech sergeant and want to throw it away? It didn't make sense. I mean, there were things that were like a
Yeah.
lot of holes in the Swiss cheese.
Yeah, yeah. So there's something there, like a remnant from the experiments that is kind of affecting people's minds, I guess. Is that what you would say?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would definitely say that. I mean,
Mm,
like I said, I I would see a lot of people. There was this one guy who stabbed himself in the stomach a few times because
right.
he felt like he had to get out of there.
Right.
And it was desperate. It was a desperation. A lot of these guys who did a lot of things to get out, it was because they felt like if they didn't get out, they were going to die. There's
Right.
a lot about that. And,
It's
you
just
know, I fortunately for me, I didn't ever think that far that I had to get out of here. But when my mom came to visit me, I'd been there almost 2 years, and she came to visit me, and she didn't talk the whole time when I was showing her around Bentwaters. And then she said to me as soon as we got off base, she said, "I got to get you out of here."
mm,
And I'm thinking, oh my God, she feels it too. And she goes, "No, this place, there's something wrong here. I got to get you out of here. This is not good." And even before she died, we were talking, and when I mentioned Bentwaters, she would go, "Oh, oh, like bad, bad." And
I mean, I still think there's something. I've been back there recently, but I've just made a film called The Rendlesham UFO, The British Roswell, which
yeah,
goes in a little bit about the 1980 incident, but it's not just about that. It's about people who've had experiences there since, and there's a lot of weird activity that's happened since then.
yeah, a
Not,
lot of orbs and that
there's a
kind of
lot of
thing.
orbs. There's a CID police officer basically saw rocks fall from the sky,
Oh
stones
wow.
drop out of the sky, things like that. when we were there, we had massive spikes of radiation from nowhere. It was really, really weird. And then we had a really strange electronic sound that was buzzing around the woods, around the forest,
Uh,
right
yeah.
next to Eastgate. And next to Eastgate, we were told that we might have this weird smell, this medical smell. I mean, we did. We picked it up. It's like, what is that? Where is that coming from? It was a real kind of hospital smell in the middle of nowhere. There's no plants
Wow.
around to give off that smell. So there's so much anomalous
Yeah.
phenomena that's happened, which is why I was keen to speak to you because obviously your story kind of predates the December 1980
Oh
incident.
yeah, yeah, and I'll share that with you too.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
was it was February of 1980,
Mm,
and I was on patrol. Now it was a time where no one had to stand
mm,
at the gate, and so I was on patrol with Airman Duffield,
mhm,
and we got to the gate. We had to check the gate again, so I had to get out of the vehicle, look for a note, and whatever. And then I got back into the vehicle, and then I put my car in reverse and pulled it over to East Gate. Now, East Gate, back when I was there,
mm.
was over by the blast wall. You know that there's that wall that's really close to the perimeter. Yeah, that's where it was, and it was really nice before the blast wall was put there because then you could see the whole runway. And then when they built it, it was like, why are they torturing me? It's already boring, you know. And so anyway, we were by the blast wall. So I put the car in reverse and I parked it right beside
Mhm,
the gate shack. My vehicle is still facing the North Sea.
mhm.
It's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we weren't told that we were getting any aircraft coming in, and because there were times we would get aircraft coming in from Simbach, Germany, different places, and and we saw this light coming in. It was a white light. It was kind of oval shape, but it gave the appearance to me that it wasn't a small aircraft. It was actually the size of a cargo plane.
Well, okay.
And and then it came as it got closer and closer to the runway, I kept looking over to the left and kept waiting for the lights on the runway to go on.
Mm,
And because then I was thinking about the next thing that we would have to do was um, get all our forms for doing get we had to do a customs check is what we had
mm,
to do. So I'm trying to figure out what paperwork I need to have so when the plane lands, we
mhm.
can go ahead and take care of what we got to take care of. Uh, well, then it stopped. It was about, I'd say about 40 feet off the ground.
Okay.
And it stopped. It didn't make any noise.
Well,
And we're thinking, and it was just hovered.
right.
It hovered for about maybe
Mm,
about 20 seconds or something. It wasn't long, but it was long enough to know that Minecraft doesn't do that.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden it kind of throbbed a little bit, the lights kind of, and then it went up down. It went up like about 30, 40 feet, and then went back down 30 feet, and then it made a left and right, kind of like the sign of the cross.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then it broke into three pieces and then it flew low and then it went straight up into the night sky and
Gosh.
it disappeared.
Wow.
So so at that point, because it flew over the runway, I knew we had to call it in.
Yeah.
I didn't want to call it in, to be honest with you, like the other incidences I had, but
Yeah.
or the other things I had, but we I knew we had to call it in.
Mm,
God forbid if something happened, you know.
mm,
So I immediately give the radio over to Duffield to you gotta call it in. And
mm.
he's looking at me and he said, no, you gotta call it in. You're the lead patrol. And I'm like, shoot. So I get on the radio and I'm talking to the desk sergeant at the time was Adam Cohen.
Okay.
And a lot of these guys at that time did not like me just because they felt like women don't belong in this
Yeah.
curriculum. And I'm like, I don't care anymore, okay?
Mm,
But so so I get on the radio and I said, police control, this is police four. be advised, there was an aircraft that came in and it started to, I didn't even get far into it. And Cohen said, um, yeah, police for get on the landline at Eastgate. So I thought, good, okay, excellent idea. I should have thought of it myself.
Yeah.
But by going to Eastgate, and now I'm able to explain it to him, I'm saying, yeah, it did this, it did that, it made geometric movements, it broke into three pieces, didn't make any noise. And the first thing he said, well, go to the air tower and check it out, see what they found.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, excellent idea.
Mm.
And it was kind of like I just needed that push because I was still in
Mm.
the throes of what we had just witnessed.
Mm.
And so we get to the air tower, we're walking up the metal steps, and I'm pounding the door with my foot because this door was like thick metal or whatever. And then this guy comes out, and I could tell obviously we woke him up.
All right.
And I said, we told him what we saw. And then he said, oh, I think that was afterburners and whatnot. And I'm like, it didn't make any sound. It's usually a sonic boom with afterburners. I mean, it's very noisy. And, and he was just, I said, what about, did you see anything on radar? And, at the time it was, everything was so, um, pretty antiquated, the systems that we had. And it was, yeah, I, and I guess at that point I didn't think about asking them to contact Lake and Heath to see what they saw or whatnot. This kid just pretty much shut me down.
Yeah.
And when I walked out, I'm just so angry because I felt like we saw something, but we have no credibility, and now I'm going to take a lot of heat for
Yeah.
seeing Rehfeldt seeing UFOs, okay?
Yeah.
And and it was just kind of it was like not fair. I mean, it was funny. Some people say, "Oh my God, I would love to see a UFO." And I'm like, "Yeah, I would too, as long as I didn't have to go through what I went through."
Yeah.
So So I'm looking out at the North Sea, thinking about afterburners
Mm.
from another base. I'm thinking it just didn't make sense.
Mm.
And while I'm looking out, I didn't realize for a really, really long time, but it was starting to become daybreak.
Mm.
You living in England, February, it doesn't get light out until like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. When this happened, it happened at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mm.
It probably lasted about 5 minutes, and we go over to the air tower, and now all of a sudden, but it was so seamless that we didn't notice that we lost about 3 hours.
Oh wow. Lost
So
time.
so that was really strange to realize that,
Mm.
because it kind of felt like, oh, time flies when you're busy, I guess. And so then I had extended my tour. I was supposed to leave in May of 1980, and I had extended my tour.
Mm.
So I left there in December 15th. I was supposed to leave December 26th,
Mm.
uh, but I said no. I said I'm going to take leave and just leave, go commercial, go home for Christmas, and hopefully this place I can get it out of my system. I never have to look back.
Mm.
And so I left December 15th, and it wasn't until 1997 when I was working at the U.S. Department of Education, and we just got brand new computers, and they put Netscape on it. So
Sure.
the first thing I type in is RAF Bentwaters, and what comes out, left at East Gate. And all of a sudden, it was as if all the stuff that I suppressed
Mm.
came out, to
Mm.
realize that the UFO, it came back again.
Yeah.
And this time it was, um, Jim Pattison being a higher ranking NCO than me at the time, being I was like an E3, and not an NCO. And then with Colonel Halt seeing it, I mean, there was credibility around it because these guys had witnessed it.
Yeah.
But it corroborated what I went through, and I was like, well, I want to talk to these guys because I want to know what they went through. And I wanted to,
Mm.
every minute detail because this is something that it stayed with me, it continues to stay with me, and I had vowed it when I left there, I said, I'm gonna write a book about this because this place was just so this is like Alice in Wonderland nightmare. And so it was really kind of interesting because the um well, that's not in my book. So I was just going to say there was a lot of infighting going on around a lot of the people that witnessed what they did, and a lot of people didn't want to talk about, say, my sighting because it was before December, those 3, 4 days, because I wasn't there. But you
Yeah.
know, I told them, I said, but these are all connected. These are all pieces of puzzles. I mean,
They are definitely, yeah.
I'm not trying to say mine is better than yours,
Mm.
because it's not my place, and I respect what they see. I expect with Jim Peniston, his book, the Enigma, the Rendlesham Enigma. I think it's a great book. And the research that John Burroughs is currently doing. He wrote another book. He's writing about the weaponization of of what was going on around us, that we were clueless. We thought we were out in the sticks. There's nothing happening out in the sticks.
No. I mean, it corroborates a lot of things that I found. There were sightings from like 78 go in the same area, basically. So it's
Oh,
all
yeah.
part of a long thing. Maybe they were testing something. I mean, what's your theory on what you saw, the craft that
Um,
got into three? That's quite similar to what Charles Holt saw, wasn't it, really, with splitting into three and all that?
yeah, yeah. You kind of wonder, the symbols behind it all, of what it could mean. I mean, some people say, well, that's interesting. Up, down, left, right. That's like the sign of the cross.
Right.
And
Mm.
there was just a lot of little coincidences that I wore a vest when I was in St. Patrick's School, and I had an emblem on my vest. I wore it for 8 years, 7 years,
Mm.
and it had SPS on it. Isn't that interesting that I ended up in another 81st SPS? And I mean, just little things like that. I had actually talked to um, Bonnie Tamplin, who was the lieutenant that she had. Um, Apparently, I guess one of the orbs got into the vehicle or something. I had talked to her in October before I left, and I was kind of scared because I didn't really, we were pretty much, there was a real thick line between officers and enlisted, and you didn't cross over. But I felt it was important that I talk to her and tell her that she has to watch her back.
Mm.
I said, because a lot of these guys, they're not what they seem to be, and this place isn't what it seems to be. But
Mm.
I didn't want to get into any details with her because she was going to have her own experience. And a really sweet woman. I mean, she was like very, very approachable, unlike a lot of the other officers.
Sure.
And and to think that she was gone, she'd only been in maybe 2 months.
Wow.
And yeah, I think on the 14th or somewhere around there, I took a picture of her. I saw her at the post office and took a photo because I just really thought she was a nice person.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so it was just interesting that, I regret sometimes not sharing with these people, others, to say, watch your back, because this
Yeah.
place isn't what it seems to be. The biggest problem I saw too with the incident that occurred in those nights in December is the radio traffic that was non-existent between the commander, Major Ziegler, the commander of the 81st Security Police Squadron, and also the wing. The wing seemed to, the wing commanders and deputy commanders and whatnot, they seem to not want to touch this with like a 10-foot pole. But the problem is that you've got nuclear bombs on the base,
Mm.
and you've got these things that are very close to the Rendlesham Forest is very close to where the site was, the weapons storage area. Yet you've got a wing that's not even making any noise to show concern or to show, what's going on or and they kind of almost immediately want to bury it, and I
Because
just
they
really
because they know the truth about what it is, you think?
yeah, either they do know the truth or they just want to stick their heads in the sand and say, I don't know.
Wow.
But they knew too that it would not advance their careers if they had pursued it. So
Sure. I mean, I found evidence that Margaret Thatcher, because she was Prime Minister at the time,
yes.
she
Mhm.
shut it down, and she wouldn't. I mean, she famously told Georgina Bruni, the journalist at the time, that
Yeah.
you can't tell the people.
Yeah.
That was her quotes.
Yeah, I had actually she reached out to me when I first this is around the time when I first came out and I'm actually in that book.
Oh, right.
Um, yeah, but I got a chance to talk to her and I put her in touch with other people that I know had similar experiences and trying to get the word out. And then some of the politics of everything, people were wondering, well, what do you think of Larry Warren? And I said, well, I met Larry when I was there. And I said he was a nice guy. He was new, energetic. He was just like the way I was when I first got to the
Yeah.
base. You want to do a good job, but you're trying to deal with the fact that the place is really there's something off about it. I mean, he felt it too,
Yeah.
and to all of a sudden have some of the people that are supposed to be the researchers of all these UFO
Mm.
sightings and stuff to go after an experiencer, it was just really upsetting. And
Sure. And
I
I,
just it paused
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
truth. Yeah.
He obviously went through something massively traumatic. You can tell that.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah. And I just think that if it wasn't for Larry, I would not have known about the that it came back. He was the first one to actually write a book with Peter Robbins, and um, amazing. Just amazing. I actually have the original book. I don't know. It's probably here somewhere. I pulled it out recently just to because I'm writing a second book about what happened after the UFO.
mm,
So it'll be more about now that everybody has learned from my first book how I was raised and what happened, and now they understand what happened when I was at Bentwaters and seeing the other thing that I saw was a mantid.
yeah, what was that? Yeah.
Yeah, that was another creepy thing, and it was all near East Gate, but the mantid was actually in what we call the non-nuclear munition storage area,
Okay.
or we called it the NMSA, and it was midnight, and it always seems like everything happens on the midnight shift. It was midnight and it was cold night again, icy rain coming down. I got my little building check sheet. So I was going to go and do this loop to check all the buildings. And I walked about maybe 20 feet from my little gate shack. Again, it was like a little tiny box, like a telephone booth. And all of a sudden I heard it was kind of like don't go or turn back or but it was like don't don't go and it put a flash in my mind of this 7 foot tall praying mantis kind of being and I'm thinking oh my God and again I was in a position where I couldn't I couldn't tell anybody, or I felt like I didn't want to tell anybody. I never wanted to tell anybody. In fact, when I did the disclosure with Stephen Greer, I told him about the UFO sighting, but I didn't tell him about the mantid or anything like that. And all the things that I'm sharing now. And and it was because it just seemed too unbelievable to say it. But
Mm.
when you're around people like yourself who are experts in many ways, they're like, oh yeah, mantid, yeah, we got them.
Yes,
Like, I
I've
kind of
heard
wish
that story a few times.
somebody gave
Yeah.
me the book so I could say, oh, so that's what a gray is. I can interpret what these things are that I'm experiencing.
I mean, I've had my own experiences, and I've got a science degree, so I'm quite grounded, and I'm always trying to debunk stuff. But because I've had my own experiences, I
Yeah.
can't debunk there is something out of the ordinary. That's why I've got an open mind, and that's why I listen to people and interview people, because there is something weird, especially about Rendlesham and that area. There's something where
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't claim to have all the answers, and people who do just, got their own agenda. But it's worth
Well,
investigating.
it's almost like you don't want to, you don't, whatever's the atmosphere there is saying, don't mess with us.
Mm,
You know, where it's a bigger, it's a bigger entity. I believe that it's like they punched a hole, like I mentioned earlier, into the dimensions, and it's this negative energy that's pouring out of it. It's
mm,
not a good energy. It's, and I kind of believe that with a lot of things when you start looking at paranormal stuff and how people can go into these scary places and that are haunted. I'm like, you gotta be careful because these things will latch on to you. I don't know. I just have this feeling of you don't want to you don't want to mess around with who you you know who you don't know who you're dealing with. And um, I had recently met a guy named Larry Costa who is down in Florida, and he's actually written a book, and he's been talking to a lot of these entities that.
mhm,
And one of the entities he was talking to was this guy, Kevin Banks, who I knew over in Bentwaters.
mm,
And I found him, he and I, we reconnected on Facebook, and he, uh, they were trying to figure out who Kevin Banks was because he was at his house
mm,
and, he was telling him things about these different realms. And um, then Larry Coster, he had a friend, Mark Wentz, who was doing some research on it because Mark lived close to where Kevin was now buried because he died unexpectedly. And he found the obituary, and I was the only one that wrote anything on his obituary. And he said, we got to find out who this woman, Lori Rehfeldt, is. So Larry Costa, of course, talks to these entities. Okay. Now, Larry Costa doesn't know me, and neither at that time, Mark knew anything about me. And the entities, the ghosts or whatever, apparitions were saying, oh, she's the space woman. And I knew they meant it with the UFO
yeah,
sighting, all
yeah,
that. I knew they weren't insulting me saying I was a space cadet. We're
yeah,
just like, no.
yeah,
But they knew that, that I've been on this search of understanding what's been happening especially during that time period of my life.
mm,
And I recently actually also got a phone call from a gentleman, and his actually it was his girlfriend contacted me first,
mm,
and he told me that not long after I left England, he was stationed at a place called Beltwell,
mhm,
RAF Beltwell,
yeah,
and he had an experience with a mantid, and it scared the hell out of him. And he felt that same pressure that the guys that I had witnessed felt. I mean, this guy was a staff sergeant working, trying to do everything right, and all of a sudden he just felt like he had to get out of there. It was either get out of there or I'm going to die. I mean, and it just,
That's
made
amazing.
his life difficult. But, you know, you, you,
Yeah.
you wonder. And then I did do some research on it too. And of course, there's
Mhm.
paranormal activity there too. And, it's,
Weird, isn't it? Listen, I'm kind of running out of time. I've got another
okay.
appointment, but it's been absolutely fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing your story and talking so eloquently about it. And where can people find your book? Is it?
It's on Amazon. It's Rendlesham Lone Ranger. And they can, and I have a website called majorlori.com.